Thank you for tuning in to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Whether you're listening during your commute, while working out, or just relaxing at home, we appreciate you. Every download, every listen, and every subscription means a lot. Up next, the 12 Kyle podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. Thank you for downloading. And thank you for subscribing to the latest edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. I am your boy, 12 Kyle. Man, check this out. On this episode, what I want to do is share a personal story with you. The story is about me. The story is about being a father. And the story is also about my son, my youngest son, Brandon, who at the time of this recording is 18 years old. Brandon, as many of you know, maybe you don't know, just completed his high school senior season of football. And the season didn't go the way that he had planned, but I want to share with you a little bit about what actually transpired and how I grew from learning from him as opposed to him learning from me. Let's rewind the clock back. As many of you know, maybe you don't know, I played college football at South Carolina State University. It's a historically black college located in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Played from 1991 to 1995. Also where I graduated from and where I met my girlfriend, now wife, Sharice, Brandon's mom. And we have, not only do we have Brandon, but we have two other sons as well as a daughter. So we have 4 kids. But I wanted to kind of give you the background as to how this story kind of came about. Again, he just finished his senior season. It was a very disappointing season, but it was a season of lessons. And I think the biggest lesson probably was learned by me. But I want to go back first to 1994, 30 years ago. I was playing football at South Carolina State University. We were in the middle of our run toward the national championship in black college football. And there was a reporter from my hometown of Florence, South Carolina, that made the 90-minute drive down from Florence to Orangeburg to interview me for the newspaper. And I'll never forget the interview. The guy was really nice. I can't remember his name, and I still have the clipping of the paper, and the headline reads, "Dowling proves doubters wrong." Dowling obviously is my last name. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you for watching. You can see the jersey behind me with my name on the back. But that was the title of the article. And in the article, they talked about how I had a lot of people who, I guess back then we didn't call it this, but you could call it haters. People who doubted the fact that whether or not because I was a standout in high school, whether or not my 5'6", 150-pound frame at the time could play major college football, Division I AA college football at the time. And the article just talked about how I was going to prove people wrong and how I was proving people wrong. And so, that happened. We won the Black College National Championship in 1994. Again, I played all through college, graduated, moved on, moved to Atlanta, got married, and lived happily ever after, if you will. As I mentioned, Brandon is the third of our sons. So his older brother, Dion, who is 25 at the time of this recording, and his older brother, Cameron, who is 22 at the time of this recording. Unlike Brandon, they didn't play football. Well, Cameron played Little League football from probably the age of 5 to the age of 10. Then when he got to middle school, he was just like, all right, I'm good. He wasn't playing anymore. And what was interesting was at the time that Cameron was playing football, Brandon started playing flag football. He played flag football and then he played tackle football probably until the age of 7. I remember they made it to the championship game and they lost because they went undefeated. And they made it to the championship game and they lost. And then I think the next year he was just like, he didn't want to play anymore. So I was like, cool, because in my head, I know the dangers of football. I would never, like, in my mind, I wasn't going to tell my kids not that they couldn't play, but I also wasn't going to push them to play in spite of the fact that football is and will always be my first love. It was the sport that I fell in love with. It was the first thing that I ever fell in love with. And, I still love football to this day. I love the idea of competing in football. I love everything about the game. The game has done so much for me. The game was very, very good to me. But fast forward to, me being an adult, I'll be honest, I was kind of happy that Cameron decided not to play because I think, while I think he could have been a really, really good football player, he didn't have the heart in it. And if you don't have the heart to play football, there's no place on a football field if you don't have the heart to do it. Because I'll be honest, you got to be a little crazy to play football. That being said, I was satisfied with Brandon playing, football. And when he decided to stop playing at the age of 7, that was cool with me. Now, let's fast forward a few years later, and Brandon decides by the time he gets to high school that he wants to play basketball. Now, he had played rec basketball in the rec league or whatever like that. He played at the YMCA, and he was pretty good. But, as I mentioned, his dad is only 5'7", so it's not, he ain't gonna be Shaq. But he decided that he wanted to continue to play basketball, and so I was like, okay, cool. So he said he was going to go out for the 9th grade team in basketball, and I was a little skeptical at first because I really wasn't sure how good he could play. But much to my surprise, he went out for the basketball team and made the 9th grade basketball team. And not only did he make the team, but he got a lot of playing time, and they won the county title, I think, in 9th grade ball. So that was dope. And then and he was, practicing and stuff, and he was, we had a trainer and everything, and he was getting good. But I'll be honest with y'all, I didn't see like that burning desire to play. I wasn't going to tell him he couldn't play, but here's the thing. Kids of today and kids of my era, we're just built a little different. Not saying one is better than the other. These kids nowadays are way more athletic. They have their hands to put on just about the most advanced piece of technology ever. We were a little bit different. We kind of got it out the mud, if you will. But you had to work. And I mean, like, while I never had a trainer, my training was every day playing sandlot football with my friends, playing, against guys 4 or 5 years older than me. That was my training. I didn't need a trainer for that. So having played, and keep in mind, when I played football, I literally played from the age of 8 all the way through middle school, through elementary school, through middle school, through high school, and then through college. And so my experiences were different, right? So he finishes his 9th grade year of basketball, and he comes to me and he says, "Hey, I want to play football." And I was like, "No." And he was like, "Well, why can't I play?" I was like, "One, you're not focused." Like, I didn't see the focus at all. Like, his focus was off and on. At one point in time, he talked about playing baseball, and I was like, "Bro, I don't really necessarily know if you can pick up a bat if you have not played baseball all of your life, and then all of a sudden you're out trying to play baseball, in the 10th grade." I was like, that may not work, player, because the kids are so much further advanced. But he said he wanted to try out for football, and I was like, we'll see. So he started working out with the team, and he got to a point where um, he was gonna play, and then it was just like his grades started slipping. So I was like, nah, bro, if you can't do it in the classroom, you're not gonna play. And so we pulled him away from football. And so then the then head coach of the football team called me, and he said, "Hey, Mr. 12, we really want to have him out there. I think he's a good kid. Blah 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 blah." So I was like, "Okay, all right, he can play." So he went out for the JV team, and he made the JV team. But here's the thing: before that coach made the call, we had a long conversation, and I'll never forget this conversation. And we were in the living room talking. It was me, Sharice, my wife, and Brandon. And he says Sharice talked and then I talked, and Brandon, he sat and he listened to what we had to say. And here's the thing: my concern was the fact that he had not played competitive football from the age of 7 to the 10th grade, and like that's a long time not to be playing. And when he played football, at 7, everybody got the ball, everybody scored touchdowns, and everybody, you won, and it was dominant and everything like that. So the level of competition wasn't the same, and honestly, everything wasn't at stake like how it is, in high school football. High school football is a different beast, especially here in the state of Georgia, right? And so I was just like, I don't think, so I gave my spiel as to why I thought he shouldn't play, right? So he listened, and then he stood up and he said, "You guys told me that you would support me in any and everything that I wanted to do, and now you're not supporting me. Why?" I couldn't say anything. I mean, he had a point, and there was nothing I could say. And the thing that I've always tried to do as a father is to let, have an open door policy for my kids to be able to talk about anything. That's the thing that I always want them to do, because my parents didn't always do that for me, but, they did as I subsequently got older. But, we try to keep the floor open and let them talk, and not just because, let's be honest, I came up in an era where, they told us a child was to be seen and not heard. So basically, you're going to do what the hell we say, and you're going to shut up and sit in the corner. So when he said that, there was nothing I could say. I mean, I had to, back him on that. And I think ultimately what I was doing was I was putting my fears of him getting hurt, fears of him getting rejected, maybe not making the team. I was projecting that on him instead of saying, you know what, let's go get it. Let's go get it. Let's go do it. And so it worked. I mean, he went out for the team. He made the team. He played as a sophomore. And then his junior year rolls around, and he's still developing, right? So he's still not as big, is not as fast as he probably should be. But that comes with not having played. And don't get me wrong, his sophomore year, he played. It wasn't like he was just on the team. He actually got playing time. But by the time he's a junior, most juniors don't play JV. They play varsity. Well, the coach said, hey, he's still developing, so we want to play him on JV and varsity. Now, in Brandon's eyes, this is kind of like a slap in the face, because it's like, wait a minute. I'm good enough to play varsity, but you want me to play JV? Like, you playing me down. Like I shouldn't be playing down with these youngsters. But apparently you can do that. I didn't know that could happen, because when I was in high school, if you were a junior or a senior, you were on the varsity team, regardless of whether or not you played or not, right? So all of that happened. So he went through his junior year, and he was playing both JV and varsity. He wasn't getting a lot of playing time on varsity. In fact, his playing time was very sparingly, but he started on JV, and he did well. And so he finishes his junior year, and he's ready to kind of take it to the next level. We had a conversation, And I asked him just like my dad would ask me at the end of the season. I was like, do you want to make it on to your senior year? He's like, yeah, I want to play. And so I was on him constantly. I was like, look, you got to work out. You got to be dedicated. You got to do this. You got to do that. And, there'd be times where I take him out to the field and we'd run routes and I'd throw him passes and stuff. And I was just like, in my mind, I'm like, I don't know. Like, because I don't see that hunger. I don't see me. and I say that in jest, folks, but I'll be honest. I'm not one of those parents who try to live their dreams through their children. I'm not. I just didn't see that drive and determination that I think it would take for him to succeed. But I also understood too, at the same time, that's not how some of these kids are built. Their level of passion is different from ours. They show it differently, so forth and so on. I did know that he wanted to play. That I did know. And he was, determined to do whatever it took to get on the field and be successful. So we working out. And then as he's getting ready for his senior year, they go into spring football practice, which was the fall of 2024. Excuse me, spring of 2024. I'm sorry. So they're getting ready for spring football, and then something crazy happens. It's time for us to take a commercial break, but on the other side, I'll tell you what the crazy thing that happened, and I'll also tell you how his senior year went. So sit tight. We'll be back in just a second. Are you feeling nostalgic for the golden eras of rap and soul music? If so, tune in to the Rap Soul Podcast. We are your weekly journey through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, spotlighting the music and the hidden gems that shaped the soundtrack of our lives. From the powerful beats to the soulful melodies, we bring you the best of the past with fresh insights and stories. Rediscover the music that defined a generation. Subscribe to the Rap Soul Podcast and enjoy the vibes. If you want a podcast where culture, conversation, and life collide, where you get insightful commentary, engaging discussions, and a fresh perspective on everything, then you need to listen to the 12 Kyle podcast. Hosted by the one and only, yours truly, 12 Kyle, a voice that you know and trust. This podcast will bring you thought-provoking moments, compelling stories, and a whole lot of fun. Whether you're a first-time listener or just tuning in, each episode promises to be something new and exciting. So sit back, relax, join 12 Kyle, myself, and my guests as we break down the world around us and give you stories that you've never heard before. From nostalgic throwbacks to everything in between, the 12 Kyle podcast is a front row seat to this conversation. Subscribe now and never miss an episode of the 12 Kyle podcast, where the vibe is always real and the discussion is always worth your time. And just like that, we are back. Once again, it's your boy 12 Kyle. This is the 12 Kyle podcast. We're talking about proving doubters wrong. At the beginning of the podcast, or at least before the break, I was telling you about how things were leading into Brandon's senior year of football. Well, at this time, he's a junior, and it's spring football practice. And I'll never forget, we get a phone call okay, let me back up. So around December, after the football season, the head coach lets it be known that he is leaving the school where Brandon attends because his wife had gotten a job in Texas, and obviously he and his wife and family were moving to Texas. So, the job was then open for anybody to get, and it took them a few weeks, but they found a coach right before spring practice started. A guy by the name of Kerry. What was Kerry's last name? Kerry Hood. Kerry Hood. Kerry Hood. And so he becomes the new head coach of their football team. And the interesting thing about this guy was that I knew him because I'm not going to say I knew him. I knew of him. I knew his name because he played college football at the University of South Carolina, which is right up the street from South Carolina State University. Well, right up the interstate, I should say. And so I remember his name, and I remember the first meeting that he had with the team and the parents. And that day in particular, I wore a South Carolina State University hoodie because I wanted him to see the hoodie to let him know that I know who you are, and you better know who I am because I went to South Carolina State. So after the meeting, we he greeted me. We had a conversation. He asked me, did I play ball at South Carolina State? I told him that I did, and we talked about a couple of people that we knew in common or what have you, and and that was that. Seemed to be a pretty nice guy, whatever, like that. So the crazy thing that happens is they go on and they practice, and they're going through spring practice, and right before school ends, probably a couple of weeks before school ends, we get a message about the coach. The coach, the one that I just described, Kerry Hood, he was at, okay, let me back up a little bit. He wasn't, they tried to get him to be a full-time employee at Brandon's school. But the school that he was at it was a school called Lithia Springs, which is on the other side of Atlanta. He couldn't be at, I think Lithia Springs wouldn't let him out of his contract. So he was still over there at Lithia Springs. He was coaching track, I want to say, and teaching throughout the day. But, these counties sometimes have this thing where, they have black male teachers. They don't want them necessarily moving to go to different schools during the middle of the school year. So that's what the thing was they said, well, look, he's a black male science teacher. We don't need him moving. We need him at the school so he can be free to leave at the end of the school year. So he was literally still teaching and coaching at Lithia Springs and then driving across the city to conduct spring practice for Brandon and his teammates, which was interesting. But he lived on the east side of Atlanta, which is closer to where Brandon goes to school. So anyway, long story short, we get a text message that the coach, Kerry Hood, has been removed from the team. What? What do you mean he's been removed? Not only had he been removed from the team, but Coach Hood had been arrested. That's right. He had been arrested in Douglas County, which is the county where Lithia Springs High School is. He was arrested for allegedly sexually assaulting a student. And so this is devastating. It is a surprise. It is a shock. We don't know anything about what's going on or anything. And so after a couple of hours pass, the school isn't saying anything. It hits the news, and then we see a mugshot, and allegedly it has been alleged that, Coach Hood had been carrying on a relationship with a student, a young lady at Lithia Springs High School. And they had all kind of charges against him: sexual assault, transporting a minor because she was on the track team. They had text messages, phone records, all kinds of stuff. And we were shocked. While I don't put anything past people because anybody's capable of anything, but, he didn't seem like that type of guy, whatever that type of guy is, but I don't know him. You know what I'm saying? I don't know anybody. So long story short, now they don't even have a coach. So the kids are shocked. Brandon's shocked. I remember the day he came home, and he called me on the phone, because I was out of town. I was in Houston, and he called me. He was like, "Hey, Dad, this is crazy." And that's all he kept saying: "Dad, this is crazy. This is crazy." And he couldn't believe it. And so we talked about it, and I kept it real with him. I was like, "Look, man, I said, no, this is tough." I was like, "But if you guys are going to focus, you're going to have to get focused." And, I said, "Your Coach Hood, he's locked up." I was like, he ain't getting out no time soon. It's going to be a while before they even give him a sniff at, a trial or anything like that, especially where the court systems are backed up and he's not a celebrity." So after the kids got over the initial shock of it, they named the interim head coach, who was already one of the coaches on staff. The defensive coordinator, they bumped him up to head coach. And so, so they kept going. finished spring practice, went through summer workouts. Summer workouts was pretty cool. And then they start the season. And Brandon starting at wide receiver, one of the wide receiver positions. Much to my surprise, that earlier that summer, he sends me a picture of himself in his new jersey. Now, he wore number 19 the previous year, and you can take a guess as to what number he chose for his senior year. He chose number 12, much like his dad. And I didn't tell him to do that. I felt like it was a great gesture. It made me proud. It brought a little thug tear to my eye, because again, I didn't ask him to do it. It was because in my mind, there's only 112, but he was little 12, I guess. So, but he wore it and he looked good in the numbers. So I was like, hey man, you got to rock with it. And so that was a really special moment. Him just doing that because that's what he wanted to do. And he said that's the number he chose. He said the number became free and he got it. So I was like, okay, cool, rock out with it. And so, they go through summer practice and then they get to the first game of the season. And I forget, I flew in that Friday, got in town, and we go to the game, and it's crazy because like this team, they blew them out, and they won the game, and the kids were all happy. They jumped. I just never forget. They were jumping around, just having a ball. And that was the game that they won. Unfortunately, they didn't win another game for the entire football season. They went 1-10. So to win your first game, August, I think it was like 15th or something like that, and not to lose, not to win another game all the way through the month of November, not exactly what you had in mind. But individually, it was a pretty good season for him. He had his highs and his lows. His high actually came the following week after the first game. It's game 2. One of the things that I noticed was like the team, his team, one of the kids they had at tight end, they would split him out. They split him out, and he wore number 0. And I told him, and Brandon, number 0 had like 8 catches. And he was like a true freshman, and nobody's seen him before, but he was nice. He was fast, and he was a tall kid. And I told Brandon, I said, well, you guys play Stevenson next week. Now, Stevenson is a school that is literally around the corner from, our house. And it's a school actually where Brandon is zoned to go to, but he doesn't go to that school. And he's got a lot of friends over there. I think he's got a couple ex-girlfriends over there. So I knew going up against Stevenson, and plus Stevenson is one of the best teams in the state, right? And so I told him right after that game, I was like, you guys got Stevenson next week? I was like, they're not going to let number 0 beat them like how, this team that you guys just beat did. They're going to double him. I was like, and you're going to be open. I said, you're going to get one-on-one coverage, and that's what you want. I said, you got to make them pay. You got to make them pay. If they're not going to double you, I said, you can blow the top off the defense, running straight up the field. You should be able to have your way with their defense. I told him those exact words. Little did I know that this boy would go out against Stevenson and put up 6 catches for 150 yards and 2 touchdowns. I couldn't have been prouder. Now, granted, they lost to Stevenson, and the game, I think they lost by like 2 touchdowns, I think. But he clearly was the star, or at least one of the stars that particular night on that field. And it's crazy because, like, even in the 2 touchdowns he got, he probably could have had 3 touchdowns. When I looked at his numbers, I was like 6 catches, 150 yards. And so when I went to, after the game, we went to go pick him up from school and, bring him back home. He got in the car and he sat down. He looked over at me and he just smiled. And that told me right there, like, he was, obviously I know my kid, he wanted to win, but he was happy that he put up those kind of numbers. And so we're riding And he was like, he said, "So Dad, what's the most yards you ever got in high school?" And see, I know this because I know my numbers. I said, "Well, Brandon," I said, "the most yards I ever got was I put up 125 against St. John's." And he was like, "Oh," he was like, "You know, I had 150 tonight, right?" And see, that's the thing about me and my kids and my wife. Everybody in our house is super competitive. We're ultra competitive, and it's constant. So it's never any malice, anything behind it. But we're always trying to be, on point with each other. And so he just smiled and laughed, and I got a big kick out of that because in essence, he had done better than I ever did in a game. They didn't win, but it was still a great game. So fast forward to their homecoming game. He gets a play called for him, and he's supposed to run a screen right down the line of scrimmage. He runs the screen, but he tries to avoid somebody, and I think the ball ended up getting intercepted or something like that. And his position coach got mad. Like I saw a position coach get mad, and then like the next series, Brandon didn't come back in the game. I was like, okay, well, why is he not in the game? Did he get hurt? And then they went to halftime, and then they came back out for halftime. When halftime started, I saw Brandon standing on the sideline. I was like, what's going on? And my wife, she was like, why isn't he in the game? I was like, I don't know. and I didn't see, it wasn't like he was, wrapped up or anything like that, like some part of his body was hurting or something. And so by the third quarter, by the middle of the third quarter, I'm like, he's not getting back in. And Sharice was like, well, what happened? I was like, I don't know. And so after the game, we talked about it. He told me, he said, well, hey, coach got mad. He felt like I, dogged it on the play or whatever. And he took me out. And I said, well, that's unfortunate. And it's not cool because that was homecoming. You only get one senior year. You only get one homecoming in your senior year. And so, so my wife was like, maybe you should talk to the coach. And I'm like, no, I was like, I'm not going to talk to the coach because, I'm not, we aren't these helicopter parents who will run and, do all of this stuff, to with coaches and stuff like that, administrators. We're not going to do that. I was like, let Brandon handle this, and I told him what to say, go talk to your coach and tell him, hey, this is what happened on that play. I didn't dog it. I'm sorry. The guy, it was an interception thrown, so forth and so on. Whatever. And tell him that, straight up. And so he did that, and his playing, so he went from starting to now just kind of being a rotational player. And this went on for like 3 games. And meanwhile, the team is still losing. And, you're seeing them losing and you see the frustration. And I'm just like, I'm trying to still, pump him up and everything at the games and stuff. And even in our conversations, tell him it's going to be okay to just keep fight through it and everything like that. And I mean, morale was bad. I mean, like they had, and I'll be honest, the school that Brandon goes to, it is a school for academics. It's not a football powerhouse. It's not an athletic powerhouse. I'll just be honest about that. So all of the kids on the team are smart and they're like Brandon. Most of them are going to go to college. And like when our oldest son, Dion, when he graduated, 98% of the kids had scholarship offers to go to school, not athletic scholarships, but academic scholarships, just like Dion did, to go to colleges. So, and that's 98% of a graduating class of, 1,400 Black kids. That doesn't happen everywhere. And I'm not crazy enough to think that it does. So it's not a football powerhouse. Like you don't have kids leaving there going to the University of Georgia to play football. Nonetheless, it had gotten bad, right? On the team, morale was low. In fact, it got to a point where there was an incident with a player on the defense who got into it with a player on the offense during practice. And subsequently, the offensive and the defensive coordinator got into it behind the 2 kids getting into it. And the offensive and defensive coordinator had to be separated by the coaches. And so the head coach told the defensive coordinator, hey man, just chill out. And then so the defensive coordinator got mad at the head coach to the point where they almost got into a fight. And the head coach subsequently said, hey man, get off my field. And subsequently fired him on the field, arguing in front of the kids. So then the head coach becomes the defensive coordinator. And the game right after that, their team played against a team called Lakeside. And can you imagine, just picture this. Picture playing in a high school football game and you score 50 points and you still lose. They lost 51-50 against Lakeside. You can't make this up. So it was a rough year. And so I just told Brandon, I said, hey man, just savor it all. Just enjoy it all. Enjoy these last couple of games, because I think in their minds, the kids felt like, okay, we're losing some of these games, but we're not getting blown out. These games, we're making mental mistakes where we can win these games. Once we get into conference play, things will be different. And it wasn't. They were making mental mistakes, of course. And by and large, with the exception of maybe 2 games, they were in all of the games. They were games that they could have won. They lost a couple of games by, less than 7 points. So fast forward to his last game of the season. We had, my mom came in town. She came to the game. My mother-in-law came to the game. My father-in-law couldn't make it because he had just had surgery. Brandon's girlfriend came to the game and her family came, and we were all there. And some family friends, we just came to support him. We part of the process of senior night. You walk your senior onto the field. So there's a bunch of pictures of me and Sharice and Skylar walking Brandon on the field, and we're holding up his banner with his face on it and everything like that. And so it was a beautiful night. And it was a close game. The game was really, really close. And then something happened. It was probably about 5 minutes left in the game. They were down by, I want to say 5, I think. And they were on offense. And by this time, Brandon's back starting again. And the quarterback, he takes the snap and he looks Brandon's way. And he throws a screen pass to Brandon. He catches the pass. Now, my wife wasn't even paying attention, so I elbow her because I see Brandon. He doesn't leave the line of scrimmage. He stands there. He catches the screen pass. I elbow her, and she starts looking. I was like, look at Brandon, because I knew the ball was going to him. He makes the catch, and he gives a move, and he gets up the field, straight up the field, fast. And 30 yards later, he scores a touchdown, the go-ahead touchdown. And the crowd is going crazy. The band is going crazy. And we think that, oh my gosh, they're going to win this game. And they didn't. The other team would eventually get the ball back and score. And Brandon's team did not get the ball back again and were not able to score. But I told him, I said, hey, man, your last game of high school football, the last time you touched the ball, you scored a touchdown. I was like, not too many people can say that. I can't even say that. I remember my last game in high school, I don't even think I caught a pass. Like we ran the ball and we ran all over this team. Shout out to Kingstree. But there was a level of pride. There was a level of accomplishment. There was a level of being able to complete what you started. And more importantly, I think, some lessons were learned. In conclusion, I think one of the biggest lessons that was learned by me. Always pour into your kids and never let whatever your fears are for them become theirs. Because here's the thing. They're going to take our lead. So what if I said, well, Brandon, I don't think you should play football because you're going to get hurt. That's me talking. That's not, he has to, anybody can get hurt playing football. But I think one of the biggest lessons that I learned was like, you can't put those kind of things on your kids. And you have to do what what you've always learned to do, which is, for me, started when I was 8 years old, and that's breathe life into your kids, breathe confidence into your kids. My mom told me when I was 8 years old that I was special, that I was one of the best people to ever walk this planet. She told me that at 8. So it didn't take that much longer for me to believe that I was going to be something, that I was going to be somebody. And I have been. And when your mom tells you that, you're going to be that guy in so many words, you're going to believe the person who instilled that in you. And so my apprehension, my desire, or my ideas of maybe he might get hurt, maybe he may get hurt from being rejected from football or not being able to play, that was something that I put on him. And if you're into proving doubters wrong, the biggest doubter can't be your parents. So a lesson learned. And one of the things that I made sure that I did, particularly when his senior season was over, was I hugged him. I told him I love him. I told him I was proud of him. But I also told him that, I'm glad I listened. I was like, you knew what you wanted to do. You kept me from standing in your way. And I don't ever want to stand in your way again. I'm always going to have your back 1,000%. And like I said, when you prove doubters wrong, make sure that the biggest doubter isn't the one that's supposed to be in your corner, because sometimes we are. That's going to do it for me. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for checking out this edition of the 12 Kyle podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the podcast. The podcast drops every Thursday, every Sunday at midnight. If you're on social media, hit us up. We're on Twitter X, Blue Sky, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, TikTok. We're a little bit of everywhere. You can also support us financially. Hit us up on Cash App, $TWELVEKYLE. And you can also buy merch. We have merch. Just look in the description box. There's a link that says merch. Click that link. You can buy 12 Kyle podcast t-shirts, hoodies, as well as coffee mugs. We got it for the low. And we have a new baby. It's called the 12 Kyle it's called the Rap Soul Podcast. My bad. It's called the Rap Soul Podcast. The Rap Soul Podcast drops every Monday at midnight. It is a discussion where we have the intersection of rap, soul music, hip hop, and R&B from the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s. It's the best music podcast you've never heard. So make sure that you check that out. And YouTube. Check us out on YouTube on the Rap Soul as well as the 12 Kyle podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it for me. I am your boy 12 Kyle. I'll catch you guys next time. 5,000. Yeah.
Thanks again for listening to this episode of the 12 Kyle podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure that you hit the subscribe button and share this podcast with a friend who needs the 12 Kyle podcast in their life. Every listen, every download, and every share helps us grow. Thanks for being a part of the 12 Kyle podcast community. We appreciate your support. We will catch you next time. 5,000.